What is up, football fans? I am Danny Austin. This is the Live from the 55 podcast. We are recording here in the Nation Network studios in Martyr Loop, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. We're about 15 to 20 feet away from where we normally record. No real reason for that. We had Ian Busby coming in. We're doing a little bit of work on our set, and the guys at the Barn Burner and just a game with Rob Kerr have graciously allowed me to step onto their set and record here. So did a little decorating. We got some CFL background, and yeah, guys, I don't think it makes all that much of a difference if you're listening, through audio format. It makes absolutely no difference at all, and you're wondering why I'm doing this uh, introduction. But I mean, the reason, if I'm being totally honest, is that we do put up a YouTube show. Podcasting might be the main thing, but we're live on YouTube. Please check us out if you just want to watch me and my guest today, Ian Busby, who is not in the studio just yet, but he's on his way in. He has graciously decided to give up a little bit of his Sunday morning to talk about what was I don't know, was this a great weekend of CFL action? I'm not sure. It was storyline heavy. You had the Hamilton Tiger Cats 27-24 over the Ottawa Red Blacks. That wasn't a great game, but it's fun final score, fun ending a little bit. Then you had the Toronto Argonauts laying a beating on the Montreal Alouettes 39-10, but that beating pales in comparison to what we saw the mighty Winnipeg Blue Bombers do to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Boy, was that an impressive showing for the Bombers at this point. We're going to talk about this before we get Busby here. That's going to be a decent chunk of my introduction, because I just think we got to talk about Zach Collaros and what he did in the first half there. That was unbelievable. But 51-6 over the Riders, that was ugly. I don't know what it teaches us exactly, but I do know that at this point, I mean, look, it really does feel like it's the Argos and the Bombers on a crash course rematch of last year's Grey Cup. It feels like that's how it's going. We've learned enough over the last however many decades, 6-7 decades, not to necessarily trust what's happening in early September and assume that that's what's going to be going on at the end of November. But those two teams are the class of the league, and big wins this weekend. Neither of them necessarily like entertaining games for a neutral, but if you follow the league and you're looking for the storylines and looking for who is the best right now, you got some answers there. Anyways, the final game, which we're going to have to get into, and I've got Busby here, so when he is with us, we are going to obviously break down the Edmonton Elks coming from behind, storming back, beating the Calgary Stampeders 25-23. This is one that all of the results sort of combined make life incredibly difficult for the Stampeders if they intend on keeping their near 20-year playoff streak alive. It does not look like it's happening right now. They are 4-9. This is a loss that, believe me, I've received emails, my tweet, Twitter, X. I'm not calling it X. My mentions are completely full. People are not happy with the Stampeders here. It really felt like this is a game that they could have, put their foot down and finish the Elks off when they had the chance. They just didn't. And I understand that frustration, but it ultimately adds up to, look, the Elks are 3-10. They've won 2 in a row at home. What a difference a couple weeks makes. But, they're not making the playoffs either. It's possible that we have an Alberta-less playoffs. I wonder when the last time that happened was. But anyways, here we are. And I want to start talking about Zach Collaros. Why do I want to start talking about Zach Collaros? Because Zach Collaros is awesome. He is always awesome. You know, that is not something I've ever denied. But I do think in this league, we talk about how the history matters, and this is a league where those traditions and the history is sort of one of its main selling points. And after that first half, I just felt like with what Zach Collaros did for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, I can't find the stats. It's impossible at the best of times. Although, no, I'm not going to do a side note here. I will get to the stats being mostly back up later. But I felt with Zach Collaros, this guy completes 16 of 17 passes in the first half for 285 yards, 5 touchdowns passes. That is as close to perfect as you can get. Honestly, I was trying to find something. I was like, how do I put this half in historical perspective? Joe Zuger, all-time single-game passing touchdowns record with 8 back in 1962. Zach with 5 at the half was well on pace. If the Riders had done their thing and put up some points and this game had stayed close and the Bombers had to keep their foot on the gas, I think Zach could have broken that. He didn't, and that's fine. Then you look at Matt Dunnigan's single-game passing record, 713 yards back in 94. Um, Historic game, absolutely incredible. We are not taking anything away from any of these guys who put up these huge numbers. But he completed 33 of 52 passing attempts, threw 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Zach threw that many touchdowns in the first half. I'm not saying Zach had a better game. Ultimately, like, this doesn't really matter because the Bombers were so far ahead that they didn't ask him to do much in the second half. And not that his stat line ends up looking bad or pedestrian or anything like that, but ultimately we're talking about a great half versus a great game. And we didn't get to see Calero sort of make history or what have you. But I still think that half, man, when we have a player doing that, we talk about, oh, well, the spring leagues are diluting the talent. The NFL, practice rosters are bigger, this and that. Well, it's like we still got guys like Zach, man. Still got guys completing, again, 16 of 17, 285 passing yards, 5 touchdown passes in a half. You can't ask for more than that. That is absolutely incredible. If that was his end of game stats total, we'd be saying great game. He might have gotten a PFF player of the week, although I don't know how that stuff works. But it was just like, it blows my mind that a player like that can come in. I hope that it is the storyline that people are talking about. I still have Chad Kelly as my most outstanding player, sort of front runner at this point. The Argos are 10-1. I think Chad Kelly has been exceptional. And it's especially funny given that the big question a lot of us had about the Argos going into the season was Chad Kelly. Well, he has answered. But man, if you want to tell me that it's Zach, I certainly think that there's going to be an argument there. I don't think that we can ever just sort of do most outstanding player voting at the end of the season and say, oh, well, the quarterback for the best team. I get why that annoys fans when media do that. But has anyone been better for 2 quarters than Zach? 16 of 17, 285 passing yards and 5 touchdown passes. Every time the Bombers got the ball, they scored a touchdown. It was just, it was an unbelievable performance, and I think we got to celebrate that. So I want to celebrate that, and I know Busby is going to want to do the same because I've been covering this league for 7 years. I've been watching it my whole life, and I just can't remember that many performances where I just saw a player so locked in. I mean, the Bombers that entire first half just looked like they heard everyone say that their loss in their Labor Day game against the Riders, somehow indicated that they had regressed and whatever. And they were like, yeah, well, look what happens when we're at home, when we're locked in, when we're a little bit pissed off. We win 51-6. Anyways, that game could have been more lopsided. But just, I don't know, you got to shout out when the arguably the biggest star in the Canadian game has a performance like that. I think that you need to take a moment and acknowledge it and celebrate it because that was pretty special. And whether it goes down, whether it's going to be remembered as one of the all-time great halves, I don't think that typically, we have the collective sporting culture memory in Canadian football to say, "Oh yeah, that great half," and talk about it later on. But that was one of the great halves that I've ever seen from a quarterback. I'm just absolutely blown away. It was exciting to watch. It's exciting when you're seeing, an elite player play their best, and that's what we got there. I also do think, I mean, if we're talking about history, this is something I'm not just trying to regurgitate my tweets here, so anyone who follows me might be bored by this, but as the Argos just comfortably strolled to that 39-10 win over the Alouettes, who I think most of us maybe by default, but considered to be the second best team in the East Division. The team that's most likely going to be in Toronto for that East final. So that was not a nothing win. I just think that I looked at the standings. I was like, all right, the Argos are 10-1 right now. I know this because the Stampeders had a shot at it in 2016, but the all-time record for most wins in a season is 16, set by Edmonton back in 1989. And let's just look at this 10-1 Toronto team and what their schedule the rest of the way is. And do we think it's a win or a loss? At Montreal. Hey, look, I know they're going into Montreal. It's a different, you're not at home. It's different, but you did just beat them 39-10. So that's a win. That gets them to 11. Home versus Hamilton. Come on. That's a win. That gets the Argos to 12. At Winnipeg, let's take that away from them. Let's just say Winnipeg wins. We know what Winnipeg looks like at home. We know that game, and that's what? That's going to be week 17. Let's make sure that we got that right because that's a game that, yeah, that's September 29th. That might just be the biggest game of the season. Grey Cup rematch. Both teams are going to be looking to make a statement. But okay, let's give that one just so that we're being smart here. Let's give that one to Winnipeg, home team, great team. So the Argos are still at 12 wins. Home versus the Elks, the Argos are going to win. That's 13. Home versus the Red Blacks, That's 14, and then at Sask against the Riders, and then at the Red Blacks. In my opinion, it is, if not just conceivable, it is likely that they get 216 wins. So I think that this Argos team right now has a shot at a little bit of history too. And that should be exciting. That should be one of the big storylines for all of us going forward. None of us like that sort of thing. But I think it's not that none of us like that sort of thing. What I mean by that, I apologize, is what I mean is I'm sure that like fans in Hamilton, fans in Ottawa, fans in Montreal, fans in pretty much every market aren't going to just want to spend the next 2 months just talking about how great Toronto is. And I get that. But I do think that them being 10-1 at this point with that schedule remaining, puts a little bit of history at play. And who knows, if they beat the Bombers, maybe they have a shot at actually breaking the record. 16 wins set by Edmonton in 89. But look, one or another, it's hard not to talk about the Bombers, and it's hard not to talk about the Argos because they just have so emphatically established themselves as sort of 1 and 1A in the league. I still have the Argos atop my power rankings just because they have the better record and they are, the reigning Grey Cup champions. But when I see Winnipeg do what they did to the Riders on Saturday afternoon, I don't blame Bombers fans if they're feeling very optimistic right now and that they have their own team atop their power rankings. As for the Stampeders, you know what? I've got Ian. He's going to be here in just about a minute. So let's go. We really quickly do want to thank our sponsors, both Mugs Pub and Fraser and Fig. You guys know I love Fraser and Fig. Got one of their security boards a couple weeks ago. It was fantastic. We're going to talk about them here in a second. And I do quickly want to make note that if you're a Buffalo Bills fan, man, Mugs Pub, a place to spend your Sundays. NFL season starting up. Make sure you check it out. They've got a big contingent, a community of Bills fans. It's probably the best place to watch a Bills game in the city. So make sure you don't miss out if you're a Bills fan looking for a place to kind of watch what might be a special season with some new friends or some old friends. Who knows? But make sure you check out Mike's Pub. We're super grateful to them for being a sponsor. They're the best. So, and thank you to you guys for listening. Thanks, guys. Let's get to Ian Busby. Guys, let's say you're having a party. Let's say you're having a picnic. Let's say you're having any occasion. Got to talk to you about Fraser and Fig because I love these guys here in Martin Loop. A couple storefronts down from our studio here. Fraser and Fig, man, these guys do these delicious elevated cheese and charcuterie boxes. They're made with all these fresh artisanal ingredients, on-demand grazing, pick up, delivery. You got it. Just let them know what you want. They will get it to you. Honestly, I'm such a big fan. I had a picnic a little while ago. I brought one of their curated boxes and it was a huge hit. I looked great. People loved it. We're hungry. They weren't hungry anymore. These ready to go boxes, they got them in 4 sizes. All their boxes come with meat, cheese, dried fruit, fresh fruit, nuts, olives, pickles, and carrots. Their selections vary from month to month. Choices are always new. Just because they've had one doesn't mean you've had them all. I love Fraser and Fig. I love having them as a sponsor. They're the best. Make sure you check them out. Tell them Live from the 55 sent you. All right, Ian Busby, my most regular guest. I think it's been a couple weeks since we've had you on.
Yes. It's been busy in the world of Busby and the world of the world, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, you, as we know, you sort of work weekends, so it makes our schedule very dependent on when the Stampeders play, whether we can do this. You have kids, like there's a million reasons why it can sometimes be tough, but
they all sound like excuses generally. But
no, but I've said this openly. I mean, my original conception for the show was sort of to have it be me and you every Sunday, and it's hard to do, but we are thrilled to have you back. You and I spent some time together Friday evening and talked a fair bit of CFL,
as we always do.
No one wants to hang out with us.
We get occasionally people that will tolerate us for a few minutes. The majority of the people that were sitting next to us the other night didn't want to talk to us, but that's fine.
No, but that's okay. One of the things that we all said, or that both of us said, not we all, was that if the Calgary Stampeders were going to make the playoffs, they had needed to sweep the Edmonton Elks. They'd done their part on Labor Day, winning sort of this furious comeback. But if they wanted to keep pace with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and then when the Hamilton Ticats beat Ottawa, now the Ticats are only 1 game ahead of the Stamps. They do play head-to-head, but the Stamps need to finish ahead of them.
Yeah, so they're technically 2 games back
exactly
of being in that crossover position, right?
And they're 2 games back of the Riders. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe both of those teams have a game in hand.
Yes. The way I broke it down, and I think I told you on Friday night, was the Stamps need to win 5 of their last 6. and they have to win those crucial head-to-head matchups against Hamilton and Saskatchewan.
Mhm.
So
I was
they
just double checking that your audio was working just to make 100% sure.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
As we quickly do our technical stuff in the middle of the show.
Yeah, that's what people want on podcasts
Right.
is just me
But
checking the
so
technical
if they
stuff.
were going to, if they had to win 5 of 6 to make the playoffs and secure their spot, you look down the road and you go, okay, their loss can be to Winnipeg or to BC. Maybe those are, scheduled losses. Not really, but
Well, BC in Vancouver is going to be really
that's
tough.
a tough game. So now you look at it. Okay, well now they have to win 5 of their last 5 to secure that playoff spot and like to for sure secure it. Now they can get. There's other ways to get there. Saskatchewan has a kind of a easier schedule. I think I was looking at it last
I
night.
did the math last week. The winning percentage of the teams that they play
Yeah,
going into this weekend
right,
is lower than what the Stampeders had.
right.
Now, there is one big caveat there, which is that the Stampeders have the Bombers in the last game of the season, when chances are the Bombers are going to have nothing to play
Yes.
for and are going to be relatively smart and rest some starters for part of the game. So there should be
Yeah.
a chance there.
They don't do full rest because they'll have a week off to really recharge the batteries. But again, yeah, you look at that game, Winnipeg likely not needing to win that game. Who knows? Maybe BC turns it on here in the next few weeks and puts the pressure on Winnipeg. But the way that the Stamps have dug themselves a hole, and when you look at this game, you just think, okay, this is not a team that should even make the playoffs because they are not one of the upper echelon teams. There was 3 games yesterday. The other 2 games featuring the top 2 teams in the CFL, and those teams look like the top teams in the CFL because they got out to leads and they put the hammer down. And it's exactly what you got to do if you're an upper echelon team, you're a contender, you put the hammer down on the other team. Like Winnipeg wasn't even trying to run up the score, but they were just so superior to
when you
the
have
Riders
when you
at
have a
home.
double
It's
digit
just
lead in the second half, you have to put your foot on the team's neck.
keep it on the
yeah.
keep your foot on the gas. And the Stamps just couldn't do that. And what did they get? 1 first down in the 4th quarter?
Did they even get one? I mean,
I think it was 1, but
Okay.
it may have been by penalty. Like it just
yeah. I looked at the Connect Live last night as I was writing my story, and it seemed to say 0. But
again, they didn't get any offense going in the 4th quarter. When you had that lead, you should be. This is a team that should be able to run the ball. They've got what we argue is the best running back in the league. It felt like a real failure on their part, and
that's the thing. There have been losses
come
where
down
I've
to a few plays at the end, but they shouldn't even have left it to that point.
well, and I mean, look, I did not like there was a pass interference call on the Elks' final drive, where
Yeah.
especially given that there was a pretty clear push off by Eugene Lewis on Trey Roberson, there are 2 calls that I didn't like. But here's the thing that I am going to say, and I put this out on Twitter: you can't win with people, but. No, you honestly can't. I had people being like, "Oh, you're whining," and I'm like, "I'm saying that those calls aren't the point."
You didn't spell whining correctly.
I know. You saw that. I was like, what are you talking about?
Winning? Was it winning? Like, I
yeah.
thought he was misspelling winning with the first.
The
part.
entire point of my tweet was exactly what you just said, which is that like in MMA, which I used to cover, the whole thing was like, if you want to complain about the judge's decision, don't
leave it to the judges.
Don't leave it to the judges. And if you want to complain about the referee's decisions, and this is the first point, you can't, like, you had the chance to mean that nothing the referees could do would matter, and you didn't do it. So that's my first thing. And secondly, I think that if you are an Elks fan, you might be looking at Austin Mack getting tossed out of the Alouettes Argos game earlier in the day for, a bit of a right cross, which I thought that was worse. But Reggie Bagleton could have been tossed from that game and wasn't. So if you want to say, oh, the referees screwed the Stamps, well, there's another play where I honestly, like, I'm not calling for Reggie Bagleton to be kicked out of that game.
No,
but like there's a pretty strong argument for that being an ejectable call, and he wasn't. So like these things balance out a little bit. And I didn't like those 2 calls, but frankly, the Elks shouldn't have had the ball. They had turned the ball over on downs with a minute 30 left.
Yeah.
And the Stamps had the ball and they did 2 running plays that didn't work. And like I don't know, there's just other options. And I didn't feel, if there's one player I don't put this game on, it's Jake Mayer.
No. Well, the conservative nature of the second half of the Stampeders, because it felt like, okay, it was working in the first half. And Jake was also the thing that I've been harping on. I was like saying for the last few weeks after the Winnipeg game here in Calgary, it was like Jake needs to take the ball down and run with it when he's got the opportunity to run. And he was doing that. He was showing more confidence and being a little bit more of that. Okay, let's just play for another down, play for fresh set of downs. When you're complaining about the officiating like that, it all evens out in the end. Like it's eventually like calls will go your way, some calls won't go your way. It comes back to even out basically.
You hope. I mean, that's
Yeah.
yeah, like
And
that's how it's supposed
in
to
all
work.
my years of covering football, I was very rarely would complain about the
Yeah.
officiating
And that's
write
not what
about
we're
bad
doing here.
calls.
We're actually saying it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Uh,
That call, the pass interference one that gave the Elks the chance to get in the field goal range, it's one of those ones that's like, yeah, there's contact. They reviewed it. You can't say it wasn't, there was contact there. So you just have to like,
well,
okay, you
Farham
have to
said it
live with it.
perfectly. He was like, it probably wasn't pass interference, but there was enough that you can't overturn the call.
Yeah.
And like again, I do not like the call.
So,
But
and there was just so many other things to like in this game up until the last quarter with the Stamps, right?
Yeah.
I felt like they great defensive game planning against Trey Ford. They were containing him. They basically had Cam. It felt like Cam Judge was in the spy position. Was like, okay,
Cam Judge was amazing.
He was our best. He's our best option at slowing this guy down. We're just going to put him 10 feet away, and it was like, where are you going? Where are you going?
When they went into prevent, it didn't work.
Yes.
In the fourth quarter. Now, I'm getting all these people yelling and shouting about the defensive backs. Let us be clear that they had 3 defensive back starters who were out of the lineup from last week and were replaced. Now, Nick Taylor, Brad Muhammad, those are established players who they were bringing in, who are veterans who have been around the league for a lot. But like that is a lot of movement, and I don't think that like in the fourth quarter it came undone a little bit, and there was a pass interference call that I actually do think was merited, and then there were just a bunch of big plays where you sort of thought like, all right, well, Trey Ford's under no pressure because they're only rushing 3. And with that, the DBs just aren't able to contain these Elks receivers right now. And I'm not saying that that's the whole thing. It's just I did sort of understand that interpretation. It was just Trey Ford couldn't throw the ball, and then all of a sudden he could. and I think if I may, like I think that this is what the nature of sports fandom and sports media is, that when the Stamps come like if you're in Calgary, you focus on the Stamps.
Yeah.
When the Stamps came storming back in the Labor Day Classic, it was, oh, look at their resilience and look how great they are. When the Elks do it, it's look how bad the Stamps were.
Yeah.
And I do think that like Trey Ford, you got to give him credit, because I actually tweeted, I was like, this guy is showing like both why he's an exciting prospect, but the limitations to his game at this point through 3 quarters, because he just couldn't throw the ball. And whatever sort of adjustments the Stamps made in that fourth quarter when they were just kind of desperately trying to hang out onto the lead, they didn't work. And what Trey Ford showed us is that he's good enough to like
you can't hold him eventually.
Yeah.
You can't hold him forever. And eventually he's going to find his plays and get his yardage, and which is what he did. And credit to the Elks, they hung in there, right? They were like, okay, well, this game, because there was a time where I was like, oh man, just one more play. It feels like.
Well, that was, to be honest, that was accurate.
Yeah,
it was one more play.
Stamps, and it's like literally this is going to be over, but it's like, okay, waiting for that play to happen. So,
and I will say, in terms of that one more play, I think that the 2nd and 3 where they tried to run the ball on their last drive is the one that I certainly like from the reaction from fans that I am getting. That's the one that people are focusing in on. And look, I get it. It certainly didn't work. So there's no defending that. I will also say though that like if they had gone for a little 5-yard pass and it hadn't worked, everyone would have said,
why aren't you running?
Why isn't the ball in Kadeem Carey's hands?
Well, that's the power running game that this team should have, and in key moments. What's the old saying in this league? You don't have to run the ball all the time, but you have to run the ball when they know you want to run the ball. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference. Yeah. And that's basically it.
And the Elks D line is pretty good. I think that like we have, and that's probably
the
been true.
Defense is not bad. Like no,
they've had bad games.
Yeah. But also they've been also on the field for periods of time that shouldn't have to happen, right? You should be on time half the game, not 3/4 of the game.
And I mean, this is, I think the point that you made where you were like, you watch that game and it is not, oh, the Stampeders, what can they do with the rest of their schedule? The reality is like, I look at their schedule and their schedule is, I have this in front of me, Montreal, Hamilton, Sask, BC, Winnipeg. Well, here's the thing. Do I think that they can beat probably Montreal at home, Hamilton, BC, and I mean, you just have to pray. Yeah, you can win 4 of those 5. The thing is, I don't think that that they're going to. They just gave
Yeah.
up a huge fourth quarter lead to the Elks. And I cover this team. So this is a little bit awkward because if any of the guys listen, they're gonna think, but like the reality is like, what am I supposed to say? They've lost what 5 of their last 6,
Yeah.
including a game to Edmonton, where yes, Edmonton had broken their home losing streak, but they broke it against Ottawa, who is the
Right.
other worst team in the league. So if if we look at this and say, okay, well, Edmonton's last 3 were Ottawa and then 2
Hamilton.
against Calgary. Well, and
Yeah.
then and they won 2 or 3. Well, Calgary's now in that. Like, look, they split against Ottawa, they split against Edmonton. That you can't
Yeah.
like this isn't me being trying to knock them down, but like the reality is they are one of the
It,
3
and it,
teams that probably isn't going to make the playoffs, and that they're going 500 against the other 2 teams that aren't going to make the
yeah.
playoffs. So
So,
how am I going to say that I think that they're going to beat
like,
like BC away from home? They're not.
so yeah.
I can't see that.
So what are they? They've lost 5 of 6.
I believe so.
Yeah, and you're looking at, okay, now they need to win 5 in a row.
They might have lost
Like,
4 or 5.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Edmonton's won 3 of 4, so it's like, okay,
The
yeah, but
facts don't lie.
yeah, and that's the
I
thing.
think the Stamps have more talent than the
That's
Elks. I think
that's
they're
the Don Matthews saying is our record is what our record is. It's like we can't say we're better than our record because they're 4-9 right now, and
yeah.
they've lost what 4 or 5 games with less than 3 points or less. Now,
I don't think
you
that
can
there is
say
a world in which
you
the
can say
Stamps lose.
you can say
50
you're close, but you're not close because you're not winning these games.
No, this is a and they like that's the thing. How many close games have they lost? They lost twice in overtime. Okay, but like they're losing those games.
Yes.
And at this point, this is about making the playoffs. That's the only thing that is supposed to matter. It's the
Yeah.
minimum for the Stampeders, and they're not going to do it. Now, do I think that on their worst day they're going to lose 51-6 to the Bombers?
No.
No. Do I think that like one way or another they're going to be close with the Riders? Yeah, I sort of think that they are. Like that's the weird thing is that they have the talent
Yeah.
and the execution to the point where, and especially with the offense, which has gotten better despite that fourth quarter. And I do think that like again, being slightly more aggressive, I think Jake is just. I saw someone tweet like, "Oh, the Stamps are stuck in this thing with Jake, what teams getting with Cody Fajardo, where he's not actually good enough." It's like, man, like Jake was
I wouldn't
great.
say that. I wouldn't say.
Jake's been great for 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And I don't like
No,
people
it's
think
not
I'm being
their
easy on Jake. It's like
not
no.
their problem right now. No, they've got other problems to worry about. But future quarterbacking, prospect. I don't think that's the problem.
No.
Maybe they don't have the hottest prospect because Trey Ford looks like the hottest prospect in the league right now. But again, we had a couple of weeks where we thought Dustin Crum was the hottest prospect in the league.
Well,
so,
yeah.
So it goes up and down. But you say Calgary has a guy that they feel like is the guy for the future, and he's the guy for right now because you got to go through right now to get to the future.
Yeah, and they're building, and I just think that like the last 3 weeks, he threw for what 370 something, I believe, against the Argos, 320 last week. Like the reason why we come out of this game and anyone focuses is simply because he lost. But like I look across the board here, and I'm like, okay, wait, Edmonton had 4 turnovers, Calgary had 0, and Edmonton won. Stamps didn't allow a sack. They were like 2 of 4 in the red zone. There's just no world in which like if they had it, I'm not putting it on play calling because I don't necessarily think that I'm smart enough to put it on play calling.
No.
But what I do think is that it was a decision to just play a conservative and preserve the win and avoid mistakes. And you said it. It's killer instinct. The best teams don't give you a chance to get back in the game.
Yes.
And
well, and that's what I saw earlier yesterday as I watched 9 hours of football which is a glorious day for me. I love it.
So funny because like I actually saw this in the intro. Like I had a great day yesterday. Like literally, like I had food at home. I didn't need to leave the house. I sat on my couch
down and
like,
just
no alcohol, just like hanging out, watching football. And like 2 of the 3 games were like objectively pretty bad.
Yeah. I don't like, no, there's enough Bomber fans in my life who are just like, we're having the greatest time. I'm like, this game's terrible, guys. It's terrible. I don't even want to watch it anymore, but I continue to watch because it's a train wreck. And I do like blowouts. I've got a weird fascination.
Well, and yes, before I do want like let's finish with the Stamps before we go on to that game.
Yeah.
Because again, that was like a beautiful blowout.
But basically what I was beautiful blowout. But also I was just like, okay, last game is going to have some juice because we're going to have a nice close game. And we did, which was great. And I enjoyed it. And then you come out of there feeling like, This is okay. People always used to ask me if I'd go on radio shows and stuff to say, what's your biggest surprise of the season? Well, my biggest surprise of the season is of all the stuff that's happened, it's not the Argos, it's the Stamps being 4-9 and being out of the playoff picture for the first time in almost it's like 17 years of making the playoffs. They were also never in the crossover conversation. They were always in the conversation to host a playoff game.
Yep.
This is a team that I've always just expected playoffs is where you're going to be, where it's just where you finish and where those playoff games are going to be is the kind of the question mark. And I'm like, okay, long ago, that hope of hosting a playoff game was gone. And now it's like, oh, can they even get in and get the crossover? Like this is just it's weird for me. It's the first time you've covered a non-playoff team or a possible non-playoff team. Me too. Like it's been 2004 since the last time the Stamps didn't make the playoffs. Now I was kind of covering the team at the time, not as full time as following seasons. 2005 is when I started doing it full time, and then it's been playoffs ever since.
Yes, and I'm going to play devil's advocate for a split second. And if anyone just decides to like, this is somehow you've listened to half an hour of a podcast and you ignored everything else I said and are just listening to this, you're going to make, oh, Danny's making excuses.
Are they hate listening? Is that what are you talking to the hate listeners?
I mean, yeah. Believe me, if you saw my emails this morning, I've got Elks fans laughing at me and I'm like, guys, I don't care. I just cover the team. And then I have Stamps fans who some of them are saying, well, good job holding them accountable. Others are saying I'm too easy on the team. One of them said, let's just read it.
All right, we're doing listener email now.
Well, you are too nice to the Stamps. Coaching lost this game in the last minute. Running well on 2nd and 3 was stupid. The season is on the line. It has to be 3-down football. Why not use Stevens, who is near perfect in short yardage? Use him 2 times to get 3 yards or pass for 3. Again, I'm not trying to make fun of this person. They're like, it's very nice that they take the time to write, but like, I'm very much helping them out grammatically. There's a lot of periods here. Anyways, I'm not going to keep going with it because it's sort of mean, and I do like this person, and I'm happy that they're drafting. But if this is the only thing that you're listening to, you're going to think, oh, I'm making excuses. I'm not. I am going to just very quickly go through the 6-game injured list for the Calgary Stampeders right now. 16 players on it, including Clark Barnes, who was
the rookie of the year until
the rookie of the year. Bryce Bell, who was at worst their sort of offensive lineman who plays everywhere.
Yeah.
But was like their starting left tackle for a number of games. Tay Daniel Amoko, Natrell Jamerson, Shaq St. Lot, Titus Wall, all starting DBs. So when people are talking about the DBs, that's 5 not starting DBs, but sorry, all 5 DBs who are not available to them.
Yeah.
Malik Henry, their top receiver, arguably the top receiver in the league. Peyton Logan, who
they're a dynamic return guy.
Dynamic return guy who was also basically their backup running back.
When I saw him get hurt, I was like, oh, that's a difficult one.
Mike Moore, who started a bunch of games at defensive end this year. Jalen Philpott, supposed to be in his second year.
Top Canadian receiver.
TJ Ram, their backup Canadian defensive lineman. Stuart Silas. It was him and Micah Alway, and I am genuinely led to believe that they expected Silas Stewart to be their starting middle linebacker this season, as a turf toe issue, hasn't played all year. Hugh Thornton, their starting right tackle at the start of the season. Cole Tucker, their rookie first-round draft pick who was expected to play. James Vaughters, brought back from the NFL.
Leading sack.
5 sacks in 6 games. And like, again, Titus Wall, they're starting Sam. Like, this team is really, really badly hit by injury. And I'm not using it as an excuse. But for all of the people who are saying, oh, this is about them not bringing talent up, this is not, you can't have 16 players.
Should we go over the list of the people that they let go in free agency or couldn't sign in free agency over the last 4 or 5 years?
Of course.
Or the guys that they lost to the NFL? Like
exactly. Scouting is the issue, except that they're somehow basically feeding the rest of the league their talent.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Scouting is not the issue with this team.
No.
They are a talent pipeline, and they always had been. They've, like, as soon as John Huffnagel took over, and it's just been in talent just comes through Calgary, and it's not the lack. I've heard that take. It was like, oh, Calgary's need to develop players. I'm like, yeah, they've developed players. They just don't develop them for themselves a lot. So
Well, they'd love to keep him, but the reality is those guys
yeah,
tend to
but
come in,
this
play
is what
really well, and
this
get
is.
bigger contracts, and you can't pay all of them
Yeah,
under the CFL salary cap,
and
so they
that's
lose a bunch of them. Now,
they're a product of their own success. They're a victim of their own success.
and is there a level where, and this is where I think that this isn't the thing that's talked about because we don't have the numbers, but like, are there going to be questions about where the money was spent this year? Probably. I can't speak to that because
We did.
I
It's not public money. Like it's not public information.
no, I
So
genuinely don't know. Now, it raises the question of, are there going to be changes, major changes to the Stampeders in this offseason? I think that, like, in terms of player personnel, obviously we'll see some guys come in, come out. That always happens. That is the reality. I genuinely think that we have seen, like, Farhan basically tweeted it yesterday, but over the last 3 weeks, Dave Dickinson has sort of taken a little bit of the play calling back. And I think that we've seen a positive improvement despite the questions that people are asking about the fourth quarter. I don't think there was a play calling issue. I really don't. I think it was more of like they went conservative and it didn't work.
yeah,
And you can question that. I'm not saying that he is above reproach here. But could Mark Killam, could Dave say, I want to focus more on being GM, and Mark Killam becomes head coach? None of this I think is necessary. And I have a feeling that if they miss the playoffs, they're going to want to
well,
run it back and prove that they're better than this.
yeah, and that's the thing. There's always change when there's a unsuccessful season in the terms of not making the playoffs, having a losing record, which is weird because we haven't had that here enough. So they've had a lot of consistency in that coaching staff, and I think consistency is the key.
100%.
So I would run this team back, and you try and have your top Canadian receiver, your top American receiver, and your return specialist, and all these guys that you've put together. See if you can run it back, and you get a bit better luck in the injury department, because some of these times it's like, no, the pieces are there. There's a lot of building blocks here. Now, this is just one of those seasons that maybe you hate to have it. You hate to say, "Oh man, it was a learning year." Well, maybe it was a learning year for this team.
There's no one.
They're a fairly young team still.
There's no one I trust more. And again, I think the Stamps having a bye week now is
they've always been great coming off bye weeks.
Yeah, they've always been great coming off bye weeks, and in 2021 when they started 2-5, they had a bye week. There's no one I trust more than this coaching staff to literally like do the work to, at the very least, give their team the best chance to win. And that is my thing. Is I absolutely, any idea that there needs to be sort of massive changes in the coaching staff, I just don't agree with. I think that this group has a track record of success, and I think that I understand the frustration with after 2023 season, so 2024, it will have, like, by the time November 2024 rolls around, it will have been 6 years since this team won a playoff game.
Right.
That is an issue that, like, cannot be ignored and needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
They have not been an elite CFL team based on the results.
Yeah.
I mean, I know for a fact that the Bombers throughout 2021 and 2022 were like, Stamps are probably our hardest playoff matchup. I heard that from people in Winnipeg, but Stamps didn't win playoff games.
They didn't get to those playoff games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They didn't get to those. Well, yeah, they didn't get to the Bombers one. So look, this is where we're at. Is the fact of the matter is, like, this team, we can't talk about them the way that we talked about the Bo Lever Mitchell era, like that, the first sort of 5 or 6 years, the first 10 years of the Huffnagel era. That is not where they are at. The Bombers supplanted them, and now other teams have moved past them as well, and that's why they're not going to make the playoffs. But I also just, I'm sorry, like the idea that there would be any sort of structural change at the top based on performance. They may, and I have no idea, they may be saying, all right, well, we got to promote 1 or 2 guys to keep him here. Dave has a family. He wants to, be GM. That may happen. But I would not be doing it based on performance.
I see no indication that Dave Dickinson doesn't want to coach this team next year, but yes, and this is what.
Well, and even talking about it, we're sort of lending it credence, right?
Yeah,
and it's like,
I know.
It's not what I want to. Yeah, it's not what I'm trying to do.
Like, don't aggregate this thing and go, well, these guys think that Dave Dickinson's on his way out. We do not think that at all. But that's the problem. So you've got several head coaching candidates on the Stampeders.
Killen, Delmonico, Monson.
Yeah, and also Mueller. Like, I would not maybe head coaching, but elevation, like
coordinator job.
These guys could be coordinators or assistant head coaches elsewhere. You look what happened a few years ago. Brian Dinwiddie gets named head coach as quarterbacks coach from Calgary. He gets named head coach. He takes Corey Mace along with him. So that's 2 guys off their staff. So not only are they feeding players to the other parts of the league, they coaches as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Josh Bell is also there, as is
right.
as is Coach Costanza.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's also one of the things that actually
make the coaching tree. We want to do that. Yeah, I don't see major change coming with this team, and I also don't see major change being necessary with this team. You might want to add a piece here and there, and you can try and shore up the areas that you were thin at this year. Well, again, a lot of times you're going to get guys back from injury. You're going to hopefully that's going to be the difference.
Well,
right?
he can already signed for 3 more seasons, I believe, and
Yeah.
he was, in my opinion, if he wasn't number 1 in the league last year, he was awfully close. So,
yeah. And again, and like you hope Jalen Philpott returns and is healthy, and you're looking at all these other.
And I mean, again, and
like,
James Vaughter
should be coming back. Like, they've got the pieces in place. I just it's just one of those. I have this weird feeling like it's only a week after Labor Day, and we're talking about the Stamps not being in the playoffs, and that just has never happened in the last 15 to 17 years. It's just not been a question. Well, like, we're always looking forward to, like, you're not going to you don't cheer for or against the Stamps, but what you want to do is have the team go to the Grey Cup so that you can go to the Grey Cup. That's one of the things about covering the CFL. That's what I was always at. I'm like, just go to the Grey Cup. I don't care if you win or not. I just want to go too. Right? You want to go along for the ride.
I think we're both conscious of certain changes that have happened. That wouldn't mean that's not necessarily.
Right? You probably not going to the Grey Cup anyway. But anyway.
No, and I agree. And
it's just a weird feeling that I'm going to the Grey Cup this year. This is the earliest I've ever booked my Grey Cup trip. And I don't there's 100% this Calgary Stampeders won't be there. And that's just a different feeling for me because they used to be there every year.
Yeah. And I mean, the reality is, I think that if we look at, and we'll move into a little bit more of a CFL wide discussion here, but if I look at the East Division, the Argos are winning the East. It's not up for debate.
Well, and one of the things that was clear about this weekend was we know where the East and West final are going to be, I feel.
Yes.
It just feels like, okay, it's in Winnipeg. You can book your ticket there for that one. And Toronto, that's going to be the home of the East final. And, everything else is for second place right now.
Exactly. Now, you have the Alouettes at 6-6. The Alouettes got beat 39-10.
They've got a Toronto problem. Basically.
I said that was a show me game for Montreal, except I say that every week on Montreal.
Well, and they were showing you a lot, but
and that's the thing. They just came in and they clearly showed that as of right now,
it's they either win or lose bad. Like they're kind of in that range of like, okay.
Well, and I think that they are certainly. I mean, I think they're right now. It's Toronto and Winnipeg.
Yeah.
1A and 1B, although I have said this, and I'll say it again, I said it in the intro, I have the Argos, reigning Grey Cup champions, 10-1, you're my number 1 team.
Yeah.
Bombers might be the team that scares me the most, but 1, 2, that's the top tier. I used to have it. And then I have a second tier, which is basically the Lions. I've changed up my 3-tier system. It's now a 4-tier system. And then I sort of have everyone else.
Okay.
Because I think that the Riders have shown me enough that one bad loss where they just they weren't ready for what Winnipeg had for them.
Yeah.
Does not mean.
See, and they
still beat them a week
earlier. They were
just
like, okay, we won our Labor Day game. And then we're like, we're going to lose the Banjo Bowl. It just felt like that was kind of like, oh, we're going to trot out there and we're going to lose this game.
Yes.
And the atmosphere there in Winnipeg was just incredible. And I can't remember a game where there was more crowd shots. Do you know what I mean?
It looks so much fun.
Yeah, it's just like crowd shot after crowd shot of somebody in a weird hat and a banjo, and
I don't know
why. It was great. It's awesome, and I was like, yeah. And if I'm a TSN director or producer, I'm just like, yeah, give me more crowd shots because that's just funny.
Banjo Bowl has to be at this point for bucket list, other than seeing a Grey Cup live, in season.
Yeah, it's probably your number one.
Yeah, because I had a couple 2019 when the Riders hosted the West Final, which weirdly very rarely has happened in their history.
Yeah.
My buddy Sean Knox was like, dude, are you sure you don't want to go? And I was like, yeah, we're driving to Saskatchewan. Let's go. I had to see a West Final in Sask, especially that one. Yeah. But this one for me, I mean, it's the Banjo Bowl is my number one. Want to see it. It might be the last major, because I've seen a Labor Day in Ontario. I've seen most of those games.
Right.
And East Final or West Final anywhere would be very high on the list. But I think in season, I don't care about Touchdown Atlantic. It'd be nice to go to Halifax and hang out in the summer, but it doesn't actually matter to me. It's all manufactured.
No, first game when the Halifax or whatever gets their team, that would be amazing.
Yeah, in fucking in freaking Narnia. When Halifax gets a team, I think that might be the first time I swore. I hope that
in
didn't.
Narnia.
Okay, Argos though, like it's the weird thing talking about. I have no problem talking about the Winnipeg Sask game because I said in my intro, I tweeted. I think that we need to do a better job talking about what Zach did in the first half. But the Argos Als was just like it was just big boy stuff from the Argos. They were like, oh no, like you can't
you're not coming into our house and messing up our day. And it was just like, all right, God, and it's fine. And so now Montreal needs to bounce back and show back at home that they can like not get pushed around anymore. So, but Toronto, like they seem to be like they go out and they just like they have these great starts and then they have these lulls and they're just like, okay, are you guys all right? Oh yeah, no, we got to win this game. Like let's go out and win this game. And it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of pressure on them because there isn't. You know, they're 9-1. Yeah. So because they're a game.
No, they're 10-1.
10-1. Okay, so they're a game behind everybody else right now because they don't have a bye in the second half of the season. So they just feel like a team that can turn it on when they need to, but sometimes they don't feel like they need to. So that could be one of those. Okay, are they going to coast right into the playoffs and host that East final and be like, maybe they'll be susceptible to somebody coming in and surprising them?
Well, we're retreating. I am now just going to ask you a question that this is on me, but I'm literally like I talked about this in my intro. Their remaining schedule at Montreal, they just won 39-10.
Yeah.
We're on paper. We're saying on paper is this win or losses in the CFL, anything can happen. Win for you at Montreal.
Yeah, probably.
Like if you were putting money on it, if you were betting,
I do put money on it. I usually wait till game time to figure that out. But I kind of like Montreal to bounce back. But
okay,
because
that disrupts my whole theory.
Because I just no, keep going. Okay. But yeah, okay. I'm not like I'm one of those guys. I'm like I'm hoping for them to be a home dog, and then I'll put money on.
If Toronto had won by a score, and then we're going into Montreal, they won by 29 points. So for me, that's a very clear like, hey, Montreal can prove me wrong.
It was real close in Montreal a month ago when they played there.
But Toronto won.
Yeah, they won. Yeah.
So they won,
and they won by 9 or 10 or something like that.
So okay. Home versus Hamilton, that's a win. For the record, for the sake of my argument, we're chalking that up as a Montreal win. Okay, so that gets them to 11. At home versus Hamilton, that's a win for Toronto. It gets them to 12 wins. Away at Winnipeg, let's say that's a loss.
Okay.
It's going to be the game of the season,
yeah,
arguably.
Well, and everybody's going to talk about that as a Grey Cup preview.
Yep. Home versus the Elks, that's a win. Gets them to 13. At Sask, I'm still going to give that to Toronto. They're the best team in the league. They've lost once all season. Gets them to 14. At Ottawa.
Yeah.
I'm missing one in here. Either way. Oh, no. And they have home versus the Red Blacks. They have home and away.
Okay.
That gets them to 16 wins, which is like tied for the all-time record for most wins in a season. This Toronto team is historically good right now.
Yes, 100%. You're correct. So
there's a chance that they set the all-time record for wins in a season.
That was a dominant Eskimos team in the 80s that set that record. Like it was a 16-2 Eskimos team with, I think their quarterback room was Dunnigan, Damon Allen, and Tracy Ham. Like it's
the 1989 team. I could look it up.
I believe that's the quarterback room of the 1989 Eskimos. Yes, this team. Do they feel like an all-time great team? Yeah. Like there's just no flaw. They're the best team in the league right now. There's really no holes on their roster.
Oh man, this is like a Calgary season. The Elks finished in first place with the CFL record, 16 wins. Then, they lost in the playoffs. So this is
yes. So 1989 was Saskatchewan Rough Riders. See, this basically backs up my theory that sometimes you coast through the regular season and you don't win the playoff.
You always want to get hot late in the year,
right?
And I think that that's why prior to yesterday, the Stamps still felt a little bit of hope,
right?
Like, okay, well, we'll get some of our injured players back. So we're going to get hot. We're going to be good. And then it just
the 15
the math doesn't add up.
What was the 15-2-1 Stamps a few years
2016.
ago? Yeah, so they didn't win the Grey Cup. Nope. So the regular season is great for giving you playoff positioning, and then you have to be able to keep that momentum rolling through the playoffs.
Yes.
So like 15-3 teams don't always win the Grey Cup, and the Stamps were 3 years in a row where they were 15-3. I don't think they came up with no.
I will also just quickly on the Argos say there's so much to like about that team, and they're 10-1.
Yeah.
Of course there is. I love AJ Ouellette. I love the job he's doing. Although I did just tweet 5 minutes. just before we got on air about how like there's no argument that Brady Oliveira is the top running back in the league right now. But Ouellette, I really like what he does too. But like,
well, and those two they're very similar because they're power backs, and we saw
Brady
last night that you need a power back sometimes, and this is what Winnipeg is doing when they're running up the score. They're just running the ball a lot, and and then you're just like you can see the defense coming off the field going, they're just trucking us, and it's even if they only get 7-8 yards, he's still like making us pay.
And so, I'm going to use that segue while also acknowledging that what I was very quickly going to say is on top of all that, they had the Argos had 6 receivers with double-digit receiving yards, like over 20 last. Like they just have they just use their weapons so effectively,
and they're not wearing anybody out. They're they're going to team. Up. They had most buys. They had all their buys in the first half, so we'll see if they're like wearing down in the second half of the year here. But again, that game yesterday didn't feel like they were like some of those guys didn't even break a sweat.
Yeah.
So, and that was the whole game. It was like, oh yeah, this is not the Alouettes need to put a little bit more effort into make them work for it a bit harder. So.
Now the Riders probably needed to make the Bombers work a little harder for it. 51-6. And yes, it was a blowout, but because I actively and I mean, I don't know how much we've talked, but you've probably this. I was just like, this is one of the greatest halves of CFL quarterbacking that I've ever seen from Zach Collaros.
They were just
16 of 17, 285 passing yards, 5 touchdowns. I was really
in the first half.
In the first half. There
was a lot of in the second half going, why is Collaros still out there for somebody to headbutt him like that?
Yep. And I hear that,
but now not it didn't feel like the Riders were in that mode of after last week when the headbutt, and it was just I also the stupidest thing you've seen in this league in a long time.
In the first half, I was rooting for Dolegala to get the ball back for the Riders and then just do a Hail Mary and score just to keep it close enough that Zach could keep playing for the second half.
Just to run up some numbers.
Well, because I knew that they weren't going to it would have been terrible if he'd gone in there and just thrown for 230 more yards, and they really had run up the score. They basically stopped trying to score.
Yeah, they weren't running up the score. They were they would get into in the drives would stall and they would kick field goal. I think they had their last 12 points were all on field goals. It was just something to that effect.
I think their last 9.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why I made a big deal out of that. It was their last 9, and I only know that because they scored on a touchdown on every possession in the first half.
Yes.
And then so I know that's where they were at.
They were playing a perfect game up until then, and it was
Oh, it was legitimately, and I said in the intro, it's I went back and because it was only a half, there's no use comparing it to the history. But Dunnigan 7-13, he completed 33 of 52 passing attempts, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
And that game was close though. Wasn't it?
I believe so. Honestly, I only
that's the reason he was kept chucking it downfield, right?
I was 10 years old and living in Toronto at the time. I was not. I don't remember the details. But with Zach, 16 of 17, 285 passing and 5 no interceptions. You extend that over, and it didn't get extended. So what's the point of debating it?
But he was on pace for.
Oh my god, he was, and I just think
almost
it was
a 600-yard game. Jesus,
if this was halftime of a Monday night football game and Josh Allen or Mahomes did that, it would be all anyone talked about for 4 days. And
they still talk about Buffalo crushing New England and having they scored on every possession, and their last one was a kneel down. That's the type of game he was having.
Exactly.
Except that in the CFL, you don't have that long of drive, so you can't just run the clock down that much, right?
It was elevated. It was honestly, it was the best quarterback half I've seen in my time covering the league. And it just blew my mind. And it was one of those things where I do feel in a one game in the playoffs, if you had to say which team would I want to avoid most for one game, I have Toronto ranked higher. I think Toronto might be the best team in the league. One game in the playoffs, Winnipeg's the team I want to avoid.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, the road to the Grey Cup is through the West is going to go through that city, and then Toronto. It's going to go through the East in Toronto. So we should see a good Grey Cup matchup because of the fact that we've got the two best teams are on the opposite sides. We know that they can face in the Grey Cup. right?
Somehow it'll come down to blocked field goals.
Yeah. We've many times had two of the best teams in the West and been like, oh, too bad these teams couldn't play in the Grey Cup.
Yeah.
So it blows my 1-9 standings out of the water this year. But
if
it's first time in a while.
If the people whose job it is to make sure, because like realistically, and I think we experience this every year, the CFL playoffs are always so good.
Yes.
That we leave being like, oh man, I wish we didn't have to wait 6 months for
I-
games because there's like
I
a little
know.
bit of momentum here. and this-
Now we've actually are like, oh yeah.
Right now, like we
So-
have, and I said this going into the 2022 season, where I mean, I don't know anything about marketing, I don't know anything about advertising. I'm not saying that, but like I wanted to see if it was up to me. I thought that the cool way to market the whole season, whether it was through TSN ads or I think it was like it's the big bag bombers and everyone's trying to chase them down.
Yeah,
like that's the narrative that we're constructing the season. Well, I think the narrative right now is it's the big bad bombers and the big bad Argos.
Yeah.
And like,
Well, and-
are they on a crash course? Can anyone disrupt the crash course? That
Yeah.
these guys are Grey Cup rematch, all that they care about. And like, if you start promoting it just a little bit now, start talking about it a little bit now, when we get this game at the end of September between the two teams, suddenly that's an event.
Yes.
That's an event that everyone in Canada.
September 29th, I believe, is the date because I've looked this all up.
I looked it up earlier and I just didn't want to get it wrong. I thought it was better to just like casually allude to it rather than say the wrong date. But like that has to be, and yeah, I'm here and I'm probably saying this a little bit because the Stampeders who I cover are a little bit out of the mix right now. And it means so I'm looking at what else interests me around the league most, but it is that it's the fact that like I think both those teams look at each other and are like, you're nothing. Like not you're nothing, but like, oh, we got you. We got you. I think that they're cocky. I think that they like a well-earned cockiness.
Yeah.
They're confident, not cocky. They're confident. I think both those teams are like, let's do it. Let's get on the field. Let's scrap. Let's see who's the best team in the league.
Well,
and that's what we all should be doing.
But over here on the West Coast, there's the BC Lions that are lurking. Like, and over on the eastern side of the country, we got the Montreal Alouettes are like, okay, we may have looked bad, but we're going to come back. This is what the thing we're going to set up for the playoffs.
This is going to sound crazy. What's the whole thing that the Ticats do? The Ticats, the Ticats
get hot late.
They get hot late and they sneak into the playoffs.
Yeah.
Now look, Bo Levi Mitchell didn't look great earlier in the season, but he's a guy I know can win in the playoffs. I know he's a guy who, so if he's back, and they're gonna they sure look like they're gonna make the playoffs unless somehow they collapse and the Stampeders get hot at the same time. Like I don't think Ottawa has a hope. So all of a sudden Hamilton
Ottawa needed to win this game past this week. Which we didn't even talk about that game, but it was a while ago.
It was a while ago, and like honestly, like
Friday night was so long ago. We had a 9-hour football game.
But there is
football day on
there
Saturday.
is that argument that like, oh, a Hamilton team that crawls into the playoffs. A lot of people had them as the best team in the East going into the season, just based on paper.
Yeah.
We were wrong, but that doesn't mean that a team with that much veteran experience, that many players who have been here before, doesn't mean that they're not. Again, you only have to win one. It's single game elimination.
Yeah,
you win one, and then you get another shot at winning one.
Well, and I've heard this adage before, and it was Tom Higgins who we often say is like when you host the divisional final, the other team coming in has won a playoff game and they feel pretty good about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So you've seen that sometimes where it's like, oh, the team coming in is like, oh yeah, they got all their confidence built up because they won the semifinal game. And I've covered many a team that was like they win that semifinal game and they're like, hey, we got this. Like the 2007 Saskatchewan Roughriders, they beat the Calgary Stampeders at home, and then it was like they went in and just whipped the BC Lions, and it was like, how did you guys beat the BC Lions? They were infinitely better than you. Well, sometimes you get the momentum going, and then suddenly it keeps going.
So I can't go further back than 2015 here, and this is the only thing about this, and I'm going to go with the West. I believe the Elks finished first in the West in 2015.
Okay, yeah.
Won the West.
Yeah.
The Stamps would then proceed to finish first 3 years in a row.
16, 17, 18.
Would always win the West final.
Yeah.
2019 is the one where Winnipeg finished third, but they got Zach late in the season. It's one of the weirdest sports stories of all time. But they went on the road twice, won. So this one was the aberration. But other than that, Winnipeg, like basically for the last at least 8-9 seasons, and my math could be wrong because of the weird COVID cancellation, but like the team that finishes first in the West pretty much always goes to the Grey Cup. So it's like all I'm saying is like
but it wasn't always that way.
I know.
So,
I know. Yeah. I'm just saying that like it's one of those weird ones where like I think that we tell ourselves stories. It's the same way like I may have heard a lot during 2016, 2017, 2018, how the season starts at Labor Day is just complete bunk.
No.
And then all of a sudden the same.
I've never really understood that one. And I
I-
heard everybody talk about it, and you guys have been talking about it the last couple of weeks.
Well, it's just, it's
season
like,
start. I mean, now
when you're in-
the season's like 60% over.
when you're in first
So-
place with 8 wins, of course the season didn't start at Labor Day. You're cruising.
Yeah.
When you're in out of a playoff spot.
Yeah,
with,
you're like,
you know,
okay, now the season starts. Like, well, now we have to win all our games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's just we all tell ourselves narratives too.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think with this one, it's like, yeah, that Tom Higgins thing is 100% accurate. You
Well,
love
because-
if you win the East semifinal and you're going into Toronto, you've got that swagger, you've proven you can do it, that little bit of experience, winning a tight playoff game. How can that hurt you? Everyone's locked in. The other team's been quote unquote resting. No, they've been practicing every day, preparing for you. So I understand that. Meanwhile, if you're the team who's hosting the East final, you're like, oh, all these bumps and bruises, we've been in the ice tank. We've been like, you just tell yourself a narrative.
Yes. Yeah,
And
you can craft it whichever you want, and I can give you an example of every one way or the other. I can say, well, the 2005 Edmonton Eskimos came in and beat Calgary in Calgary, and then they beat BC, and BC went and won the Grey Cup in Vancouver. Yeah, that was what. But then the 2006 BC Lions, they hosted the West Final. They went to the West Grey Cup. They win it, right? You can say, did they win that one? Yeah. Pretty sure they did. I'm going to say they did.
My computer's at like 12% because I didn't bring my chargers, and I need to like.
I was wondering what you're closing it for. Like, oh, we're just gonna. You're not going to talk.
No, this wasn't like
you're not going to look up
saying,
stats.
Wrap it up. This is literally me.
You're not going to look for stats that you can't find. Is that
no? My computer is. Long story short, but my computer cord is like damaged, and I'm trying to get a new one.
Oh, okay.
The issue is I can't really move it. Like I can if I have to. If I'm going to cover a game, I'm
Yeah,
obviously bringing it with me. But like I don't want to further damage it, so I didn't bring it with me.
Yeah.
And so now
I generally don't bring my cord anywhere either, and I just charge it, and then hopefully it's good throughout the day.
Lesson learned, guys. Bring your
Right.
cord. Is there anything you want to add quickly before we wrap? Because it's been amazing. You did way more than I expected you here.
Oh, okay.
It's after 11 too. So
Oh yeah, I should get going.
yeah, I know.
Interesting. Like looking forward, I'm like the Stamps having a bye week always makes us look to the rest of the league, right? So it's going to be a rest of the league type of week is the way I look forward, and I'm just I'm interested in what happens because the playoff race, but it's the Hamilton games that are the ones that I'm watching closely right now.
You know what my
I felt like that was I felt like that was the best chance for the Stamps to get in. Was you needed Ottawa to win on Friday, they didn't, and you needed to beat the Elks, and you didn't. And now it looks like okay.
It was a 2-game swing.
Yeah,
it was a 2-game swing. You know what my bye week means?
Pardon?
You know what my bye week means?
Oh, you're gonna take some time off?
I have to cover hockey.
Oh, great.
That starts. So
when's I'm totally oblivious.
The
Are they
Flames golf tournament, I believe, is Wednesday. So that's really
okay.
for us. And then like the rookies go to Penticton. Like
Oh, okay.
so it all sort of starts picking up pretty quickly here. But we're gonna keep doing life in the 55. We're gonna keep talking football.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
Ian Busby, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Guys, what are you doing tonight? I don't know what you're doing tonight. You're probably looking for something. Guys, you got to go check out Mug's Pub. This is probably my favorite pub in the city, 1330 15th Avenue Southwest, right in the Beltline. Honestly, they do it all. I, for years, played trivia on Wednesday nights at Mug's. It's the best trivia night in the city. Other nights, they got music. They got specials every single night. Some of the best food and drink specials in the entire city are at Mug's Pub. You want wine, you want beer, you want cocktails. They got it all. Big fan of their fish and chips. They got some amazing pizza. You want to watch the game? They got TV screens. You want to just have a drink with friends? Perfect spot to do it. You want to have some food? As I said, it's delicious. Mug's Pub. We love having them as a sponsor. We love having them just down the road from us here at our studios. Check out Mug's Pub. They're the best. All right. Thank you to Ian Busby. That was awesome, man. That was honestly, love that guy. Good friend of mine. So happy to have him come on and just kind of talk CFL with us casually. It's what we try to do here. And again, thank you to Fraser and Fig, one of our longtime sponsors here. Love them and love Mug's Pub. And again, if you're a Bills fan, I'm not kidding, man. Mug's Pub is a spot to be in Calgary. They got a huge fan following there for all your NFL games. Definitely worth checking out Mug's. But Bills fans, that's the spot. I'm telling you, I am sort of a Bills fan, but very fair weather. Not really fair weather. The Bills are always good. I watch a lot of football, so sometimes I'm not the biggest watch every down of NFL until late in the season. But make sure you check out Mug's if you're a big fan. what did I just say? Make sure you check out Mugs if you're a Bills fan. That is it from us. We are, despite the bye week, we're going to be dropping our regular recordings this week. So Thursday mornings and Monday mornings. I don't know, please like, subscribe, tell your friends. We're just having fun, guys. Anyways, thanks for watching.